Welcome to another episode of Peanuts from the Plebs, the midsummer edition. It's the first day of August today, and things are heating up, and I don't mean the weather.
Yes, hello everybody. Thanks for watching. So what are we gonna talk about then this
Well,
show?
I had a couple of things in mind, but I don't want to monopolize things. Anybody?
So the big stuff is obviously the Maxwell document release and the continuing saga of the VP choice, right?
Yeah, and I thought the
Are
VP
those the big ones? Yeah.
I think those are a couple of big ones. I thought
Yeah.
I was pretty sure that Biden was going to announce yesterday or today, because usually they'll announce this like on a Friday
Yeah.
afternoon, to kind of like avoid all the news coverage immediately. But he didn't announce it apparently, right? And it seems like I think there's a lot of pushback against Kamala Harris. That's my guess.
So this is kind of my conspiracy theory, I think, for the day. I think there's like a war going on behind the scenes. Basically, I think that Obama is pushing Susan Rice, who they owe because she took the heat of going out to talk to all the news crews after Benghazi attack and say it was a bad video and all that, right? And I think the Clinton people, because Kamala's sister was a lead advisor for Hillary, that they're actually looking to get Kamala in. So I think there's a push behind the scenes because whoever is VP will be president or will be, president along with the deep state and the DNC heads and Hillary or whatever,
Right. And
Yeah,
isn't the
so that,
theory to get
yeah.
the worst possible, candidates so you can just barely win against Trump?
Well, then again, it's the whole idea that do they even care about winning? Because what actually gets accomplished by both the duopoly, the Repubs and the Dems, is what they want, like more war and wealth for the wealthy, and worse distribution of wealth. And it's probably actually a lot easier for the Dems to not be in power and just fundraise off Trump bad, Trump bad, Trump bad. I just don't really know what to think their actual motivations are.
So they're basically a cover for the Republicans, right? You remember that I sent that link to that YouTube video, and I got to
Right.
find that. But he was discussing an article in Medium. Let me see if I can locate that. But basically, that the idea was the Democrats never expected to win, of course, this time around, and then COVID appeared, right? So before that, it was pretty clear that they got rid of Bernie Sanders, who was the biggest threat.
Right.
Even though, how much of a threat was he really? But he was considered the biggest threat. And then once he was removed, then Biden miraculously won South Carolina on Super Tuesday, and like everything fell into place for him.
Right.
But it was kind of expected that Trump was going to get reelected, right? If nothing terrible happened.
I would have thought so. Sure, I would.
Then something terrible happened,
and they think they can use it, or it's all just a front because behind the scenes they pass the duopoly agenda. They pass what the Repubs want anyway. All the judges get passed, and the wars keep rolling. Trump wanted to bring the troops home, and they combined to stop it. Trump signed judicial reform or prison reform, etc. Got rid of bump stocks, hasn't started any new wars. It's much worse for them to have any type of populist, whether it's Bernie or Trump,
right.
in place. It just so happens it's much more dangerous for us if it's Trump because he's kind of insane as well.
Right. Right.
Well, what we want is a sane Trump or Bernie. We want a sane populist in place is I think what we want.
Well, I don't know as far as Trump goes. Yeah, he's kind of insane, but he's also kind of lazy. I think he's not like he's a lazy authoritarian.
Did he actually do this, or there was talk about he was signing an executive order for importation of drugs from Canada? This is like a Bernie dream that Cory Booker and other Dems voted against.
Oh, hadn't heard about that, but that's all the more reason to get rid of Trump, right, and get Biden in there, so they can go back to normal.
Exactly.
But I found the article. Okay, so the article originally that this, and I'll give you the video in a second, but it was Russell Dobular, who doesn't really have much published out there, Dobular, and it was in his website is called Due Dissidence, as in due diligence, but duedissidence.com, and the title was Joe Biden is a Trojan horse inside the Democrats' new right-wing coalition. So the gist of the article was that Joe Biden is kind of he's a way for the Democrats to consolidate conservative establishment, I mean, that for lack of a better word, right-wing forces against the progressive challenge from the popular left challenge to the Democratic Party, basically embodied through Bernie Sanders, but others as well. And so the idea is that they could get the person who was the least, just a little bit to the left of Trump and get him elected, and then basically he would return things to the imperialist, neoliberal, neocon status quo.
So with Biden, no doubt about it that happens. Of course, I mean, I'm sure there are a whole lot of Republicans that probably would prefer, Biden to Trump as well. The ones that are invested in the war machine and everything.
Right. Okay. So the YouTube video I saw was it's called Howl Underground, HOWELL. And this guy, I mean, he basically just reads articles with his commentary, but it's very entertaining. I've only watched a few of them.
Okay.
And I think I sent you that video a couple days ago, but and that's where he, read that article, the Medium article by Dabular about Biden being a Trojan horse, and I thought it was really kind of on the money. And how basically the right, the right, which is the Republicans, they represent the right, but the Democrats are basically the corporate Democrats are cover for the Republicans. So basically, it's almost like if you were going to change things, you'd have to get rid of the cover first rather than trying to get rid of the. It might be more effective trying to get rid of the Democrats first than to try to attack the Republicans. And this is it's a false dichotomy, So everyone
we're actually talking about them cooperating with each other, and at some level they know that they, that they're working together.
Yeah, I mean, not all of them are necessarily totally aware of that. But it's kind of like the Yankees versus the Mets or something. Right. It's like two different teams. So everyone's like, well, we have to get Biden in there. We have to defeat Trump. So we can, because the Supreme Court and the judges and Biden's going to be in much more progressive. Wait a second, didn't Biden say he was going to veto Medicare for all, and didn't he? Wasn't he behind the prison so-called reform that put everybody in prison?
Yeah.
And, so like he actually isn't a progressive, but the idea is that somehow he's better than Trump.
Yeah. But what you're talking about is essentially collusion, at least at like the Pelosi Schumer kind of level. It would have to be, setting the agenda and so forth, the way Nancy will, just go pass all the judges.
Right. Well, I mean, the collusion is not the puppets who are the politicians, but the puppeteers, who pull the strings. So, I mean, there are, as far as the puppeteers go, it doesn't really matter which puppet's in the White House, whether it's a Democrat or a Republican, as long as they're serving the same goals, right? Mm-hmm. So, I mean, whether Schumer and Pelosi are consciously, conniving with Mitch McConnell, and I don't know if they necessarily are. I don't think they really, hang out together, when they're whatever. But I think there is some kind of
you're saying the effect is the same.
The effect is the same. Yeah.
Puppet masters might be at a higher level.
Right.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
Right.
I'll buy that.
And I guess I guess I can bring in my Moscow Minute. I'm not over with early on here, but I was I remember from grad school reading Lenin, and Lenin wrote this essay in 1917 called "Imperialism: The Highest Stage of Capitalism," and his thesis was basically that World War I was an imperialist war between these imperialist powers, and it was an outgrowth of capitalism. And basically, he talked about finance capital, which was not just money, but it meant any kind of like these extra profits that these companies made, especially as they went into like colonial, like third world places. They could have cheap labor, cheap resources. They built up this great wealth, and they were working together with the banks to basically try to create new markets, and they fought over the markets and access to raw materials and labor, and that's basically what war is about. And I was asking myself, how relevant is that still to today? Because that was, over 100 years ago that he wrote that. And um, I think Lenin, I'm not condoning him, or I'm just saying, for what it's worth, how relevant is it? And I think it still is relevant. Although one thing that didn't exist really 100 years ago that exists now is the influence of the internet and computer technology. So that the communications have become globalized, and there's a populism that has grown out of that globalized technology. So I think that's a difference. But the question is, we're in an era of, supposedly the Pax Americana is being threatened by China and Russia. So in a way, it's kind of like that's the imperialist power now. Is U.S. wants to keep access to its cheap markets, like in Vietnam and Southeast Asia. That's why the South China Sea is so important. So in some ways, it does echo some of that analysis by Lenin, and 100 years ago, of these capitalist powers fighting over imperial powers fighting over these third world
cheap labor
cheap
sources.
labor, and right.
Sure.
And also it's like keeping the dollar dominant, obviously the petrodollar, and not letting, go ahead.
It has multiple, serves multiple purposes for them, for the rich to keep getting richer and so forth, because basically, if we're taking advantage of third world countries for cheap labor, they're churning out, televisions that cost like $150 these days, right? For a flat screen, a smaller flat screen.
Right.
And then you can pay your workers in the United States like almost nothing, because they can get a flat screen for $150, and even though food and shelter costs are quite high, those kind of things they can still get cheaply anyway,
Yeah, for now, but once you lose your job and you've been evicted, then you can't even afford that. And one of the things Lenin, predicted, again, I'm not saying I, approve of him or whatever. I'm just saying this is what he said, that capital will become more and more concentrated at the top. Okay. Yeah. So Jeff Bezos' case in point, right?
And we are the petri dish. We are that experiment.
Well, it's just like,
worse
I
and
don't
worse
think there's
time.
any kind of mysterious laws of nature. That Marx kind of saw that there were these laws in the Hegelian sense that, that there was inevitable progress of history. I don't agree with that necessarily, but I think we've seen this concentration of wealth right at the top, and capitalism, which seems works on a micro level to some extent, where people are productive and they're trying to make something and its labor has become specialized, right? So everyone's not building their own car. Like you kind of work together, and you have a special skill that you can sell in exchange for your labor in exchange.
You do one thing. You're not like the farmer a couple hundred years ago that knew how to fix his wagon and milk the cow and fix the barn, and right, absolutely.
Right.
Yeah, completely specialized. I have no idea how to do the simplest things to maintain my house, and have to get into, whatever. So other folks to do that,
But I think we are becoming more and more, but it gets to a point where the wealth becomes so concentrated that, Jeff Bezos, what is he going to do with his money, right? So he made, in one day, he made, $10 billion or something. It was in the news. What do you do with that money? And obviously there's a lot of people who that wealth has been sucked out of, the lower.
For a few days
strata.
running, people were making the observation that Bezos has enough money that he could essentially solve world hunger on his own. And they would post, there was a tag that was something like, I guess Bezos isn't going to solve world hunger today, or something like that.
Yeah, well, that's, capitalism is based on, the idea of freedom, that somebody at the top is going to say, oh yeah, okay, I made all my money. Now what am I going to do with it? Yeah, I'll solve world hunger and I'll give my
Right.
money away. Well, it
Or
doesn't really work that way.
Carnegie building libraries or something. Or
Yeah, I
yeah,
mean, which is
yeah,
fine, but Lenin's kind of like, well, if you got somebody with that much wealth in the top, they it's not legitimate, so that
yeah, I agree with
there's
that.
no, whether you take it from them through taxation or just basically you confiscate it, it's not their wealth. Now, I would say, definitely Bezos he has given something to society. Amazon is a phenomenon that didn't exist before. You know,
But it's
um,
also got so many destructive sides
well, and I think
for the
it
economy.
segues into that House subcommittee hearing this past week with the technology giants,
Right.
right? Which was what it was: Amazon,
Yeah.
Facebook, um,
Yeah, and
Google, and Apple,
Bezos
right?
basically he admitted, was it Bezos that basically admitted like, yeah, we probably use the information we gather, in aggressively against our competitors.
Well, he said it's against our
Yeah,
policy, but I can't guarantee that it didn't happen.
right,
But of course, like the thing that's relevant, whether or not they actually did that, is that they have the power to do that, right? So like they're in a position to be
right.
able to do that. So they have so much power that, okay, they may say it's against our policy, but they have the power to be able to do that. So that's that that's the issue. Other people
Yeah,
don't have that kind of power. So how can you compete with Amazon? Because if you go and if I'm a small vendor and I make my widgets and I'm going to sell them in Amazon, Amazon's going to take a big cut of whatever I sell, right?
right,
Because they provide the platform, you know. And then
right. And if it turns out that it's something that's like profitable enough, and they're in analyzing your revenue stream, they'll start to create it themselves.
but like
And
what's
then,
what's the upshot
you
of this?
know,
Because this is supposed to be that antitrust, right? So in a earlier time, if you had like AT&T or you had um, what was the Standard Oil, you'd break them up, right, into smaller companies. So like Standard Oil, they broke up into these, SO and these different companies, Sunoco or whatever, and AT&T, they broke up into the baby bells back in the like whenever that was in the 70s. So you had S&ET and you had these different smaller companies, right?
mhm.
But you can't really break up Amazon in the same way. Like you couldn't say like we're going to have an Amazon for west of the Rocky Mountains, right? It wouldn't make any sense, because it's a
And you
global
you
thing.
have the same yeah, you have the same problem trying to, like, I try and encourage people to use Parler or something instead of Twitter, but of course people's reaction is like, well, but everyone's on Twitter. And I'm
Right,
like, well, use both anyway. If you at least use both,
right. So they
then then enough people will gravitate to Parler that there's enough competition that you have some leverage against Twitter to say, no, you can't act that way against us. You can't
right,
shadow ban
right.
us.
So that's
Right.
obviously that's the path to try to compete with them, but it's a much higher, um, uh, you know, uh, grade to try to break into that than it would be like you can't just break them up either by geography or by function. So you couldn't say like, okay, only Amazon Books is going to sell books now, and they're going to be separate from Amazon, shoes, which is going to sell just shoes, and Amazon Electronics is going to be separate. Like it wouldn't work the same way. Um,
Yeah, they have to, but they have to find a way to do it, right? Or
well, I
else it,
mean, I, I
yeah.
mean, I think the obvious thing is like it's become like utility, right?
And I was thinking that is the way it's heading.
You know,
Um, yeah.
you know,
How else can you do it?
Now I
Right.
know that's
Yeah.
socialism, but if you have a
Right.
utility, it should be government run, right? Whether it's retirement, Social Security, basic retirement, or whether it's basic medical care, single payer, or whether it's your fire department or whatever, or public schools. It seems like okay, now we're getting into like products and services. Normally, that sounds pretty like the Soviet system, right, where you have
Right.
state-run enterprises and stuff. But in a way, it seems like why not have a government run like Amazon, and then have that wealth being poured back into the economy for the benefit of everyone, rather than what's the difference whether you do it that way or you have Jeff Bezos run it and you tax him at 92%.
Sure. And I would say that in doing that, first of all, I would say that like, that has happened in the past. I mean, people were probably shocked when private fire departments were, that you would pay in order, hey, if you want your house to be saved, if there's a fire, you have to pay a private fire department to come do it, and they wouldn't rescue your house if you didn't pay them, right?
Right, exactly.
That became it became obvious to everyone. Well, we need this to available for everyone to be paid through taxes. The internet is a standard enough thing now. Like you say, it essentially is a utility. Yes, everyone that owns stock in it should become fabulously wealthy. And it should be taken over as a utility.
Well, I mean, I don't think Jeff
And
Bezos should not be rewarded for his entrepreneurshit. I mean, obviously.
He absolutely should.
But
Absolutely.
I mean,
everybody that and everyone that knew to invest in it also, they should be very, very well rewarded.
But it used to be that taxes would take care of evening out the playing field, right? So you tax people at a high rate. Under Eisenhower, the top rate was 92%. So people who made above a certain amount, that income above that level, whatever it was, $1 million or $10 million would be taxed at a very high rate. So that
absolutely should be happening now, right? I mean, isn't the basic theory of anti-monopolistic practices is that no one, a private company can't get too big and then they become a powerful monster, right? Well, individuals are the same way. I mean, nobody should own more than $100 million or whatever. You can argue what it should be, but the tax rates should essentially.
But how's that going to happen? Because first of all,
Amazon
didn't pay any taxes, right, or paid nominal amount of taxes, so they can use their accountants and their lawyers and their Swiss bank accounts and everything to kind of hide profit. Or they can have the company located in a different country or whatever, their office, so they are not subject to paying U.S. taxes. So there's like ways to evade all that kind of responsibility. So what's the answer?
It's above my pay grade. I say send lawyers, guns, and money, and figure it out. Someone, I don't know. Yeah.
I mean, it seems like the wealth is getting concentrated on the top. Again, to paraphrase, Lenin, this is what the trend is, to have a wealth concentrated at the top. And as a result, you have impoverishment of the bottom, masses, right? So like this is coming to a head now because the extra unemployment payments ran out yesterday, the $600 a week. Maybe they'll get something through the Republican bill of like $200 a week, but people are going to be, evicted, and they're going to be on the streets. And like when people get desperate like that, like I don't know. I think that's something's.
We have to direct all the tent shanty towns have to be on the same block as a politician. I don't know what else to do, to force the issue and make it real to them. It's just not real to them or something. I just don't understand it.
But
I don't understand how you can be responsible for the welfare of millions and millions of people and not take it to heart and not do the right thing in these things. I just don't understand it.
Well, they'll try to paint this as being some kind of provocation from Antifa or Russia or something like that, or China or whatever, and then they'll come in with the big guns and just clear it out. I mean, I don't.
Well, what do you mean? What do you mean clear it out?
Well, I think what we're seeing, like in Portland, is kind of a preview of what we might see down the line.
Oh no, but if there are millions of people evicted, how do they clear that out? How is that not on their conscience that that's very likely to happen, right?
I don't know, but the ideology has a way of shaping itself to fit the situation. So, I I tend to think very dark sometimes, because obviously we would like to see some kind of justice, economic justice, where things are, people have the right to life, first of all, which isn't even guaranteed nowadays, really. The right to life, and the right to basic, food and shelter, basic needs, right? And you don't have that. So what is the, what's going to happen if you don't have, things are going to go downhill pretty fast. But I think, potentially they could just say, we're going to, it's your problem if you're homeless and you don't have enough food to eat. It's your problem. We can't take care of you because you obviously have failed in the capitalist and marketplace. So like, it's not our job to give you a handout, because ultimately it's not just printing money. Ultimately, it's going to be taking wealth from the top and redistributing it to solve that problem. And I don't see that happening without a
Yeah.
real struggle.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, my basic point is, I don't see how, I just don't see how politicians live with themselves with seeing this happening on their watch. Why there aren't at least some politicians, chaining themselves to the doors of Congress and saying, no, you're not going home on vacation until this is solved.
Right.
It's crazy to me that there's nobody that is really raising the alarm bells the way it deserves to be
I mean, I think what
done.
we need to see is like, 1 million people descending on Congress, like
Yeah,
demanding single payer healthcare and just saying we want it now. And
right,
kind of like how is the state going to react to that, But I
right.
think you're right. If you have, if you have the power of numbers is what we have on our side, right? So if you
Mm,
have 1 million people showing up because they have nothing else to do, they have nothing to lose, right?
right.
They're going to show up at Congress and say we need to have this. Then I think, um, you know, there'll be some kind of reckoning, and maybe something will happen as a result of that. One can only hope.
Yeah. Yeah, Moving for a People's Party kind of essentially tried to do that over the 2 weekends that they tried to physically go to Congress persons' houses and basically, make it real to them. No, we're serious. We're talking to you. We want you to understand that we have these demands um, for a bailout for regular people. Um, yeah, and I don't know. I don't. I guess I just don't understand. I don't know if it's something like they the United States has actually acted as such an empire for so long. I mean, they've gotten used to signing off on you know policies for war and sanctions that kill so many people around the world that they're just used to any kind of human suffering, and
Yeah.
it doesn't ring home to them. I
Well,
just don't
Jim,
get it.
it's to protect our way of life. You know that.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah,
but I mean, when people lose that, when they can no longer buy their big screen TV because they've been evicted, then it doesn't matter anymore. I mean, people have quote unquote benefited from that for years, right? Of having cheap consumer goods, having benefiting from that system, cheap oil,
right.
benefiting from that system of exploitation. But at some point, it's the chickens are coming home to roost, right? So,
Right. Yeah.
at some point, uh, if you're no longer enjoying the benefits of that, and it's only this top elite that is enjoying the benefits, um, then then the time comes where people are going to say, okay, things need to change. Um,
Yeah. Well, that's real. I mean, and if you can feel it, you can feel it. It basically feels like anything could happen going forward from here with the various protests, and the threats by Trump to cancel elections, and who knows what actions by Democrats to push forward a man in final stages of dementia or early stages of dementia, I guess, in order to get a puppet in place or something. Or I just
right.
don't know what's going on. Right.
So you mentioned MPP. Do you see like that growing, that movement?
I have not seen signs of it getting terribly bigger. But they certainly are still out there, putting out their message, and I think it's generally a good message. I'm still kind of afraid that they're going to become another Green Party. That they're just going to that right now they're Bernie's Revolution 2.0, and that it's kind of exclusionary to bringing in folks that are a little more conservative, and I think that I believe Daisy agrees with this. What we really need is kind of more central populist movement. Like I say, kind of a sane Trump with some more progressive tendencies,
You
basically.
think this idea of Brett Weinstein of having Yang and who's the Republican
Oh yeah,
officer? What was his name?
McRaven. I think it was an admiral or something.
McRaven, right?
I love the idea, but I love the way he tried to pull the rug out from folks that would say that, but you're going to elect Trump if you vote for this. The Nader Jill Stein argument, because it had baked into the cake. It had that if you're going along in the campaign and you're just not generating enough that you're going to win, then you pull the plug on it. That's like baked into the cake. But I don't think either. I don't
They're
think
not
there's
going to
real.
do that.
Yeah, I think it's a great concept, but this year it's simply a concept that came up a little too late to actually be acted on.
So what do you think of the argument? I hear this argument from people. It's like, yeah, you can vote third party, but you have the privilege of being able to do that. What about, people who are, other people have said to me, you should vote for Biden because he's going to be making Supreme Court appointments and judicial appointments, and whether or not you agree with him on medical care or whatever, you have to vote for this guy because Trump is so terrible.
That's the settle for Biden. I don't know if one of you guys can share your screen. There literally is a website,
Right.
settleforbiden.org,
Right.
and they literally make that argument like, look, nobody really wants this guy, but he's not Trump. Basically that's what's going on, right? And you're talking about Supreme Court picks and things like that, and all those are valid arguments. It doesn't excuse Biden end up being the pick out of that array of folks that originally ran for the Democratic Party. I mean, he's like among the worst, especially when you're talking about a time when we're all looking at social justice and police reform, and this guy is the crime bill, and he is segregation, and he is war on drugs, right? And if you talk about bringing Kamala in, you're talking about prison slave labor and keeping people in jail because for political points, because you don't want to give up the case even though new evidence has come out and all that. I mean, these are the antithesis of the people the Democrats should be running right now.
Right. But but the argument is that, okay, it's symbolically very important to have a woman of color as vice president because she will presumptively become president at some point. And it's
the symbolism of her being an aggressive prosecutor that worked with private prisons and employed slave labor to fight California fires overrules that completely in my book. And I'd go with Karen Bass or somebody else. I like
right.
the idea. I think symbolism can be important, and breaking barriers is important, and I would go with somebody else.
But I can just see, like, the argument
She's
is
horrible.
Like, we're not going to, you and I are not going to suffer necessarily directly if Trump is reelected, right? But
That's true.
But other
Yes.
people will more, So they're saying, well, you have, you can easily vote for, third party candidate as a protest vote, but and I'm just kind of playing devil's advocate here. I'm not.
Oh,
I'm not
sure, yeah.
that.
But I refuse to see the Democrat Party as a passive player here. They engineered Biden being the nominee. This is not a matter of, oh well, it ended up being Biden, so we got to go along with them. And I mean, they engineered that through, in some ways that were, legal and fair, and a lot of ways that were not.
Right. I mean, it's amazing that you had this massive popular movement in 2016 and 2020 on the left. I mean, with Bernie, and then it's just like totally like evaporated. And Bernie won the first three primaries, right? Or the first two primaries anyways. And they're like,
yeah, and that's never happened.
It's never happened that they haven't.
It's never happened that someone's won the like two out of the first three and not won the nomination, let alone all three. Right. That's never happened. And it was completely engineered. And I say some of it was legal, like, and weird, but legal, like with Obama calling everybody else and telling them to drop out, and Elizabeth Warren obviously playing a part in sucking off some of Bernie's votes, where everybody else dropped out, right, on the conservative side. But there was also the Iowa app that was obviously engineered to cause problems. There was all the issues with the exit polling that were always 10% off and in Biden's favor. You know, there was the long lines in Bernie areas, 4 hours waiting to vote in Bernie. I mean, all this stuff was engineered. There's no doubt about it.
So what can we do to counter that? Because I mean, obviously, I mean that guy Howell in his video, you know, said that I'm not so much for the voting approach, I'm more for the in the streets approach, and that he's not dismissing the election process
Yeah,
as a way to affect change, but
right.
he's saying that you know, you're naive if you think, you know, electing Biden is really going to change anything. Um, you know that you have to, there has to be stuff going on, like there has to be protest, there has to be um, resistance in the street, where there's, you know, hopefully nonviolent resistance, but there has to be
Right.
like more of the stuff you see going on like in Portland
Right.
around the country, so that, you know, this
Or
becomes, go
or
ahead.
what if it was simply concentrated in Washington D.C.? I mean, what if you had, you know, a Hoover Town, you know, build up, you know, a shanty town, build up a giant, you know, everywhere you can. Basically, have people saying, even if they're not specifically the people that have been evicted and they're
Right.
homeless because of this horrible situation, people that represent them, right? Um, Go and be camped out as long as you can, or take
Yeah,
turns,
it
or
could
like
happen,
that,
especially when people
all
get
over
really,
Washington
if they're
D.C.
really
Yeah.
desperate. But remember what happened to the Hoover towns? Like Hoover sent in the troops and cleared them out.
Well,
Uh,
make them do that.
right,
Make it that
right.
obvious. I mean,
Which was, that was the
yeah.
downfall of Hoover too. I think that he did
There you
that. You
go.
know,
Exactly, exactly. Show, you know, have tough on crime Biden and Kamala show their stripes, and do that. You know, that video, videos change, videos and pictures change things, right? The right
right.
picture can stop wars.
And then you get back to the technology again. I mean, you know, 100 years ago,
Yeah,
we didn't have that. You didn't walk around with your iPhone being able to take pictures of stuff or
right.
videos. And now you can do that. And instantaneously, it is, you know, now obviously they
Right.
still pull the strings like on some of these made, like on Twitter or whatever, they can control things. But, you know, which makes these alternative platforms all the more important, right? Like
Absolutely.
Parlor
Yeah.
and uh, you know,
Yeah. You can get this. You can get this stuff out there. You know, they can. They have to demonetize a lot of our allies now on YouTube, and I think people are realizing to also check out Rofkin and
right.
so there, you know, there are ways to get things out. There's also some regular websites out there that can carry videos and all that. So yeah, I don't know. It's really difficult to see
I
where
mean, it
this ends
also,
up.
it becomes a global phenomenon too, because no longer is it it goes global immediately, right? So if you put something up on social media, it's not just
Right.
restricted to this country. So, you know, I think it's important to keep that global perspective on things. You know, like the Black Lives Matter, you had protests in Germany and different places around the world, not just in this country. So it was,
True.
you know, it became
Yeah.
an international phenomenon very quickly.
Yeah. Do we want to switch topics at all, or
Yeah,
yeah, I don't know if we want to touch on the Epstein stuff at all. I mean, there's really nothing terribly new, right? We kind of knew that if Clinton was wrapped up in this, the stuff that's more definitive about him absolutely, you know, being, according to the testimony, him being on the island, in the, you know, him and Epstein with like two young women or young girls um, present, you know, essentially, you know, orgies, which essentially we're talking rape, were constantly happening. So it's not like it's not like he could not know what was happening there. And the only twist I would want to add to it is that at some point there was video released from Amy Robach. Do you guys remember that, the ABC News
right.
correspondent, where she said they had definitive proof against Epstein and they had Clinton. She said, but the ABC News squelched it.
Squashed it.
Right, they put it
Right.
down. And my question is, like, right now, why isn't somebody demanding to see that evidence as part of Maxwell's prosecution? And why aren't they demanding that these people testify? They're saying they had conclusive evidence. They have it supposedly somewhere still filed away, right? It was a report that wasn't presented, but that information must exist. And Amy Robach, if nothing else, must know that information. And I just don't understand why um, the victims' lawyers aren't reaching out, or is there a non-disclosure thing for maybe did Amy Robach have to sign something after they came out? But it seems like they should be compelled to bring this evidence forward.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, it seems kind of half-assed to me, the whole approach. Like they're investigating this, but it's kind of like reluctantly. At the FBI and Department of Justice and everything, because it's like it's a two-way street, right?
I don't know. I think they actually are investigating it more than people have been giving them credit for. I mean, not fully, obviously, because they all have their ties. Like, Bill Barr has his ties with his dad being the one who gave Epstein the job over at, what was it?
The
Harvard?
Dalton School. The Dalton School.
Okay.
Yeah.
In New
So
York.
yeah, the Dalton School. Yeah. So they're all mixed in all of this stuff. So I was hoping that there was going to be more information other than what we kind of already knew or kind of already suspected, because I feel like any of this stuff with Bill Clinton, I feel like if anything, it's just more of a cementing of the fact that he was there. It's just more evidentiary, but ultimately it's not really revealing anything new. And I remember the whole week leading up to this, they had been like almost like teasing it, like, oh, who are the names that are going to be exposed? And I mean, I haven't watched a lot of this stuff. I haven't read into anything. I'm sure that you guys are more adept into what's going on, but I haven't heard of any new names coming out there that would, make anybody nervous.
They definitely oversold us, because it was like, yeah, we're going to get all this testimony about all these names. And then like when it finally comes out, they said, oh, but the names are redacted. And I'm like, what? What are you talking about? And, but I heard something online where people were saying that people they're able to get around the redactions somehow, and I'd have to go research that to see if people have got really good ideas of who the names are that are there. But
and that's always the issue, right?
Yeah.
Whenever we use the FISA courts to get any sort of information, it's always highly redacted or heavily redacted. So you really don't. So whatever information it is that we do have, that's why I always tell people that the atrocities that we know about that are going on, this is only what they let us know about. So because a lot of the information that's out there is heavily redacted. So I can't even imagine the kind of stuff that actually is going on. But I feel like, the fact that you had the issue with the judge, that her son was killed, that's nuts. Which case I'm talking about. But this had to do with the Deutsche Bank case, right? That she was assigned to the case, and then somebody put a hit on her, I guess. But it's interesting because it's like, obviously it was sending a message. If they killed, because it's supposedly the whole thing with that is that she had tried a case, I think like maybe a year ago or something, or 2 years ago, and that person was, there was something wrong with them mentally, and that they were holding a grudge against her. And but if the grudge is against her, why would they kill her son and shoot her husband?
Well, they came to the door and she was downstairs. So I mean, but it was like the way it was portrayed in the media was this guy was just a lone wolf, crazy, anti-feminist, men's rights kind of guy who did this. But do you think there's something like it goes deeper than that? Do you think that was kind of a cover story?
I've told you, I don't believe in coincidences. I feel like, and especially we know how heavily infiltrated the CIA and the FBI, all these people, all these intelligence agencies, how infiltrated they are in our media. And the media has proven time and time again that they are just stenographers for these intelligence agencies. So whatever it is that they tell them is what they go with. Half the time, honestly, and I could, but again, this could be just my conspiracy side of things, that whenever I see that anything is blamed on anyone, I always question it. I never believe it outright. I don't care matter how much evidence you say you have, because how many people do we have behind bars that unfortunately, because they didn't have enough money the way that like Ghislaine has or the Epstein had, you know, that they're not able to fight these charges. And the most of the time, what do? They end up pleading guilty and they lose their lives over it. There's so many people that are behind bars specifically for that reason. And a lot of the times these police agencies, the reason why they push so much for this is because they just need to have that is the whole point, right? It's because they don't want to have, like, how are you, like, let's say it's like a gun violence victim, you know, how are you going to tell the family that you don't know who killed them or whatever? Obviously it's just easier if you have at least some poor person who doesn't have the wherewithal to be able to fight for themselves. They're the ones who end up getting the shit end of the stick.
Well, yeah, and for political reasons and for career advancement reasons, like Kamala had these kind of situations where basically it seemed that she kind of suppressed evidence, didn't let a person on death row take a DNA test when there was like evidence that he didn't do it and all that kind of stuff, and in order to further careers, right? Well, basically, when DNA testing came out, there were a whole bunch of cops that ended up in hot water because all these things came out that they framed somebody because they just wanted to, like you say, either just put an end to the case, put a seal on the case, make a family feel better that they caught that, maybe that's putting the best light on it, right? Or
they
career,
need justice, justice needs to be served.
The numbers need to look good, right?
And it was a DA, it's not the cops.
And career advancement is based on it. Well, yeah, it probably goes up and down the chain, right? Everybody wants to see that the numbers look good, right?
Yeah, you got to think of it as if the cops are funded by the city, that's not a very good investment if you're not solving cases. If you know what I'm saying? That if you don't have a good track record, well, then why are we giving you more funding, or why are we funding you to the tune that we're funding you in a lot of these places? Like, I mean, think about like Chicago. Think about how many unsolved murders go on in Chicago every single day. Still, even with this pandemic going on, it's still, the numbers are intensely crazy. And the police there are just, even with all the money that they're given, like, it's still not enough for them to be able to actually fight crime.
Yeah, and there's always a list of people that the cops, you know, in cities anyway, that the cops like, well, we didn't catch him on this, but we know he's up to something, you know? There's always these people that they're happy to pin crimes on, just because, you know, they don't like them, they got a grudge against them, or, you know, they think they're
famous gangster? Oh my God.
Al Capone.
Al Capone, that they got him on like tax evasion or something, right?
Well, I'm thinking more like the FBI in Boston, Whitey Bulger, basically all these murders were pinned on these other guys that were bad guys. I mean, they had done like robberies and stuff, but they hadn't murdered anybody, and they basically pinned the murders on them to get their informant Whitey Bulger, who was like a horrible gangster, off.
Well, even in Chicago, I was actually watching a story the other day that they were talking about that for under Rahm Emanuel, whoever was the police chief, they were actually like they were essentially a gang. They were literally pinning stuff on people. They were putting so many people behind bar. Planting shit on them, arresting them for nothing, just going up to people's houses, robbing them, like doing all these things they're supposed to be fighting against, or it's crazy, and then it's gone on for so long, and obviously this is what we know. So think about all of those innocent people who went to jail, again, who have their lives ruined. I think that one of the worst things in the world that could happen to you is when you become part of the criminal justice system. When you are inside the system, your life is, in most cases, it's over.
Right.
What was Matt Taibbi's book? It came out about 10 years ago. I'm just looking for the name of it. About the justice system and how there's basically two systems of justice. You know, there's one for the elite and there's one for, or not even so much the elite, but I mean the wealthier people.
Yeah, if you have money, then you
you can afford an attorney.
Think about Alan Dershowitz, the fact that he's regarded as this excellent lawyer, even though he's, you know, helped out people that are a little questionable, maybe, you know,
Right.
Matt
not on the
Taibbi
good
spoke.
side, you know, maybe he got away with stuff that, you know, other people wouldn't have gotten away with. But the only reason why they were able to, you know, evade any sort of incarceration was because of the fact that they were able to pay for someone like Alan Dershowitz, who is, you know, is a master debater,
Well,
essentially.
that's right back to Epstein. Basically, the FBI and folks had all the dirt they need to put that guy away for child rape back in the 90s, and he, you know, flourished through a couple of years ago.
And it's
And
not just
even
having.
the like think about Virginia Giuffre. She was sued by Ghislaine Maxwell and by Alan Dershowitz. You know, for what is that when you go against someone's
Defamation,
character?
defamation.
Defamation.
Yeah,
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 character defamation.
yeah.
So you know, it goes to show you that, and think about like all these other victims who they didn't have enough money to go and get like these fancy lawyers. Like, you know,
Right.
some of the lawyers we have seen, they've stuck with these victims, which is amazing, you know. But for the most part, that's not the case, you know, in general.
Yeah,
Uh,
and obviously the whole point was to deny the thousands of girls justice, but basically like making a show of Virginia Giuffre. It's basically, if you surface yourself, we're going to destroy you.
right.
You know, we have limitless supply of dollars to fight you in court, and we'll destroy you financially immediately. You know.
Well, how many too were actually killed? I mean, we don't even know that. That's the ones who can't speak, right?
Yeah,
Exactly.
the Netflix documentary insinuates that basically the woman that was like a secretary, like right in the front, essentially a secretary, says the number of girls I saw coming and going, they had to have been killed.
So
There
this
just
this
should
is
be
the
so many.
judicial. This is the
Yeah,
divide that Matt Taibbi talks about. His book is called The Divide. You know, like the elite can commit these egregious, horrible crimes, right? And they get away with it. And or whether it's, you know, whether or financial crimes, for example, if you're laundering drug money and you're a bank, that's okay. You know, you can get away with that. No one gets put in prison. But if you steal, you know, water from a Walmart during, you know, like Hurricane Katrina, you get shot, right, or you get arrested. Matt
right.
Taibbi gives the example of in I don't know what city was, Chicago or one of these, you know, cities where the cops just go around looking for people like 3 a.m. If you're standing on the street, like a guy was standing on the street in front of his apartment, they arrested him for obstructing pedestrian traffic. They just
Oh my God.
Okay, so they just picked up somebody, and then
Yeah.
they said, and then his court-appointed attorney said, "Well, just plead guilty, pay the $35, and you'll get off." And the guy said, "No, I'm not going to do that." You know, he said, "Well, you're just making it really difficult for yourself." But that's what they do, and so
Yeah.
the cops get their numbers, right, that they have so many arrests or
Right.
whatever. But they'll actually
Right.
create
Yeah.
situation. I mean, and this is not to speak of the absolute corrupt cops who would plant
Right.
drugs on you or something to get that drug arrest, but just driving around and saying, like, you know, you're standing on a sidewalk, we're going to arrest you for obstructing pedestrian traffic. Now they're not going to do that in Scarsdale, right? You know,
Right. Exactly.
they're going to do that in
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
some poor neighborhood.
Yes.
And the guy had just come home from work, you know, because he's working second shift or whatever. So he got home at like 2 o'clock in the morning, and he's
Right.
standing out in front of his, and he gets arrested. So
Yeah.
I mean, it's just
Yeah.
Or
we
think
don't.
about the fact that people are like, well, first of all, that divide exists in so many facets. But first, I wanted to say that think about that, you know, she is somebody who is considered so powerful and so rich that whatever happens, no one's going to believe. Like if she all of a sudden commits suicide or whatever, no one's going to believe that she committed suicide. You know, they're all going to think that it's some sort of cabal, that, you know what I'm saying? Like it's something so much bigger, you know, like
I don't know. I think people believe it. I think a lot of people will believe
Well,
it. The media will tell them that, and they'll believe it. Especially my, you know, wealthier friends, they're going to believe it. I'm sorry, but they will believe
yeah.
it.
But then the other thing that I was going to say was that that divide that exists between like the rich or the elite or the powerful, whatever, and the poor or the less than or whatever, is it's evident in even with the package, the package, the fact that it was big corporations that were bailed out, and then it's the small businesses and the everyday person that are left to figure shit out for months on end. It's or even like the fact that we have to have like what you guys were talking about, the FANG, supposedly the FANG stocks. That's what it is. It's like Facebook, Apple, all these big tech companies. You know, we wouldn't allow for a small business to have this monopoly, but they have become so entrenched in our economy, like so vital to it, almost like going back to the whole imperialism thing, that it's become so vital to our economy that we cannot, like, it's detrimental to us, shutting them down. That is how crazy, upside, like topsy-turvy it is, that the elite have us, that we need to sustain them. We cannot let them fail.
Wasn't it Eric Holder? Eric Holder said this, or somebody in the Obama Justice Department said, when it comes down to it, we can't go after some of these companies because to do so would create economic disruption. So basically they're saying, well, justice is selective, because if we go after these companies, it's going to affect the economy. This company might go bankrupt. People are going to lose their jobs. Ergo, we can't go after these companies. So it's basically like, if you're small enough, fine, we'll go after you. But if you're too big, that's going to be too disruptive, and we're not going to go after you.
Yep. Or even think about how, like how people will, people that are protesting are being accused of being terrorists, essentially, or you have, the protesters that are fighting against pipelines, that they're considered environmental terrorists or economic terrorists or whatever. But the actual terrorists, the people who actually, have gone and used for, fear for political purposes, which is the actual definition of terrorism, like people like Obama, like George Bush, like Cheney, like all these fuckers, all these war criminals, they are praised by everybody.
Oh, Bush is completely, like, I was posting, I don't know if I brought this up before, that, W for quite a while was Hitler Satan, right? And right now Trump is Hitler Satan. But you see now, like, W spoke at John Lewis's funeral.
Yes.
He's, you've got pictures of Michelle Obama with her arms wrapped around him. I mean, who's to say that in 10 years Trump isn't essentially just another one of them? Except he's a populist. He's a different animal. If he was if he was a real Republican doing everything he's doing now, then that would happen.
He's not playing by the rules, so
he's not creating wars. He's not doing everything they want.
With the whole thing, that it just goes to show that there is this disparity of how your regular person is treated versus somebody who is considered too big to fail, or too big to jail, or whatever the fuck.
Yeah, too big to jail.
Oh, absolutely.
Bill Clinton delivered a eulogy for John Lewis too. I mean, it was kind of ironic having, on my news feed, one story about Bill Clinton delivering the eulogy for John Lewis, how moving it was, and the other one is about his connection to the Epstein affair. And the next story.
I think I don't know if it was done consciously to give him some good stuff right before they knew this other thing was going to drop, but that was like a 1-2. Like, literally, it was like the Lewis thing happened, I think, immediately before. I thought it happened immediately before that.
Did it? Okay. Well, that would make sense.
Yeah. I think they managed the timing of that or something. I don't know. But
hey guys, I want to do a story, if that's all right.
Okay. I had one quick thing I want to get in, though.
Yeah.
Was that I found it really interesting that we just talked about the funeral for John Lewis. I want to have a funeral for the Young Turks as a progressive force. Basically, Nico and Convo Couch and others are basically reporting that they send out, like, essentially a fundraising email for Biden, and in there's like language that essentially says that, well, yeah, we're making some money off this kind of thing. So they sold their 1 million+ subscribers to make money to push Joe Biden, right? And they're just completely gone as far as I'm concerned.
They need places in his cabinet as well. Okay.
So this is not Justice Democrats. This is just this is Young Turks.
TYT, the Young
TYT.
Turks, Zenk and what's her name?
Anna
Anna
Kasparian,
Kasparian,
right?
Emma Vigilant.
Vigilant, right?
But you're the child, Jim, because you don't want to vote for Biden.
That's right. That's right. Right. Well, they were the big pushes for Hillary, suck it up, and they were big pushes for Warren. And yeah, they had some Bernie support, but they were willing to overlook him. Really pushing Biden behind the scenes, and now they're all full on board with go Biden. They're horrific.
Yeah, because if he picks Kamala Harris, you really got to support Biden because that's going to work against him.
Right. Right. Yeah.
I mean,
okay. Sorry, that was a quick one.
Okay, Daisy. You have
I
the
get
floor.
that in.
Okay. We actually haven't talked about this, but this has been a big story now for months now. Do you guys know who this is? So this is Army Specialist Vanessa Guillen.
Right.
She went missing in April from Fort Hood.
Yes. Okay. Yeah.
And so I just wanted to touch upon some stuff with this. Hold on one second. Okay, so I came across this story. So it says Guillen's family as they push for military. Oh, sorry, my bad. All right. No wonder. I was like, wait. All right. So, terrible story. Trump meets with Vanessa Guillen's family as they push for military sexual harassment reforms. And this is from USA Today. And so it says President Donald Trump met Thursday with the family of Specialist Vanessa Guillen, who disappeared from Fort Hood in April and whose remains were found earlier this month. So he did talk about, he said that it's an incredible story. It's, terrible. And he also said that they're going to look into it very powerfully. The way that he speaks about things.
Yeah. He's very, very strange. Yeah.
I just don't understand it.
Yeah.
So he said, we already have started, as you know, and we'll get to the bottom of it. So we'll see. I mean, maybe it actually, the fact that this story has gotten all the way to the president, I think that it puts a lot of pressure on him, the fact that he met with the family to actually hopefully do something. So we shall see.
So what is the significance?
I thought he also said they were paying for the funeral.
And, so that's what I'm getting to.
Okay.
What were you going to ask?
So what is the significance of this story? I mean, obviously she was murdered, but is the idea that it was covered up? Is that why is this different from all the other homicides that happen around the country?
So you got to let me talk.
Okay, I'll let you talk.
All right. So a funeral has not been held because Guillen was dismembered and relatives are waiting for her remains. Her family's lawyer, Natalie, I'm not even going to try that, told Trump, which I thought that was just like, really, if you know the details of it, like they decapitated her and they just like they chopped her up, they burned her, and it's really disgusting what they did. So he, this was Trump. He said, if I can help you out with the funeral, I'll help you out financially. I'll help you. And this is obviously her mom, which her mom has been such a strong lady because obviously that is, like, I mean, you guys are parents. How do you deal with something like that? Like, how do you have the bandwidth to deal with something like that? I don't even know. So it said, also Thursday, the Army named an independent panel of 5 experts to investigate whether personnel at Fort Hood and the surrounding community have allowed for a climate of sexual harassment and discrimination to flourish. So it's going to be led by Chris Swecker, who is the former assistant director of the FBI's Criminal Investigation Division. So the reason that it's had to go to now having a federal investigation like this is because Fort Hood, they have been doing an investigation, but for like 6 weeks, they had nothing. They sat on nothing. They weren't even really looking for her. And so it is the same issue that we have with police investigating themselves. You cannot have any trust that the investigation is going to be done thoroughly or correctly or ethically because they are investigating themselves. So if something's going on, then obviously they're going to hide it, and there is a lot of speculation with her murder that what they're saying is that you know, like she wasn't supposed to go into work, but she was called into work, and they ended up finding like her card key, like all this kind of stuff in this armament room, and supposedly that's where she was murdered. But the fact that no one, like none of the cameras worked again.
Oh,
Well,
jeez.
no cameras working.
Oh,
Supposedly all the cameras are duds. They're just there for show on Fort Hood.
oh,
Okay.
oh.
And that no one saw anything, like the time that it took for this supposed person to kill her, like for him to go and clean this whole room, because supposedly the way that that he killed her, that he stabbed her and all this kind of stuff, he would have had blood everywhere, and there wasn't blood that was found all over the room. So it's just it's very weird. And the fact that she had come out and said that she was being harassed by a superior, right? And so obviously we know that with the Army there is this culture, there's this issue where there is sexual harassment that goes
Right.
on, and unfortunately, because there isn't a third party that they can talk to, that they can ask for an investigation, then a lot of the times they get shot down, you know. Which, I mean, look at the way that we treat other sexual assault victims. Imagine in the Army or in the military. So it says, Army has been under fire for its investigation into the disappearance and death of Guillen, who was 20 years old. That's the other thing.
Oh,
And her whole, like, ever since she was a little girl, she always wanted to be in the military. Like, she had all these aspirations, and that's how she met her end, you know? And so investigators had focused on specialist Aaron Robinson, who supposedly was the person who called her into work, as the primary suspect. And it says it took 2 months to develop evidence to lock him up, and he fled before he could be detained and died by suicide. So again, it
no
took
kidding.
2 months to
So,
develop evidence.
so
Okay.
he either did it, or he did the call in
Or he
collusion
was the patsy.
with
Right.
somebody else, right?
Right,
Yeah.
exactly. Exactly. And it says, earlier this month, Army officials disclosed that Guillen may have been harassed in an unrelated matter to her disappearance. Are you serious? Like, seriously, may have been harassed. They're not saying for sure, okay? In
Wow.
an unrelated matter to her disappearance and murder.
Yeah.
They're saying that for
Yeah.
sure,
How are they
100%.
with no evidence? That's crazy. Right. Right. That's
Exactly,
crazy.
exactly. So
Yeah.
it says that matter is under investigation, and so now there is this I am Vanessa Guillen bill, and which would allow active duty service members to file sexual harassment and assault claims to a third party agency instead of the chain of command. So, you know, these bills, they never go far enough, but at least it's starting the conversation, and hopefully that would actually do something. So it
Right.
says U.S. Reps Mark Wayne Mullen from Oklahoma and Tulsi Gabbard from Hawaii are sponsoring the bill. Representative Jackie Spire, a member of the Armed Services Committee, is preparing legislation to reform prosecution of sexual assault cases in the military. The measure would also direct the Government Accountability Office to examine the Pentagon's sexual harassment and assault prevention and response programs and its procedures for responding to missing troops. So, again, obviously, if this was just one person, this would not be a story. This is a story because obviously this is a problem that they're having with Fort Hood. And who knows if maybe it's just military culture, you know, alt-right, right? Or outright. So then I came across this other article, which it's from Missing People in America. I don't know the legitimacy of this website or anything like that. I'm just using it. But and so you have pictures here of these different people who have gone missing from Fort Hood. And so this is from June 25th, 2020. It says that Fort Hood is located in Killeen, Texas. It's the biggest armored U.S. military base in the world and houses over 65,000 people. It's nicknamed the Good Place because of the supposed quality of life the post and area offers soldiers and their families. And so they go through this list of people who have, you know, essentially disappeared or showed up dead, but, you know, they condense it into this timeline. So from March 2020, okay, you have Shelby Tyler Jones, 20 years old, U.S. Army, gunshot wound, Killian, unsolved homicide. March 5th, Christopher Sawyer, 29 years old, U.S. Army, found unresponsive at on-post residence under investigation. And that's the other thing. A lot of these, it's, who knows? Who knows how these things have gone down? Also on the 5th of March was Raul Torres, 24, U.S. Army, passed away while stationed at Fort Hood, cause of death unknown. March 14th, Shaquan Allred, 23, U.S. Army veteran, gunshot wounds, Killian, unsolved homicide. Also March 14th, Freddie De La Cruz Jr., 23, U.S. Army, gunshot wounds, Killian, unsolved homicide. March 25th, Victor D'Onofrio, 22 years old, which, again, these guys are so young. It's so sad.
Yeah.
U.S. Army, died at Fort Hood, cause of death unknown. April 2020, on April 22nd, Vanessa Guillen, 20 years old, U.S. Army, missing and foul play suspected. Last seen in the parking lot of a regimental engineer squadron headquarters. May 2020, May 18th, Brandon Rosencrantz, 27, U.S. Army, gunshot wound, Parker Heights, unsolved homicide. Again, this has all happened since the March. Okay, this
in a fort of 65,000, which isn't
right. It's not
huge,
like it's not like it's happening in the state of Texas. This
right.
is all happening in this little concentrated area.
Yeah, it's not New York City or something. It's
And then here in June of 2020, the remains were found of Gregory Weddle Morales, who had been missing since August of 2019. Again, 23 years old, U.S. Army, unsolved homicide, body located off post in shallow grave after declared AWOL. There's something going on here, obviously.
But I mean, so Vanessa seems like a different situation. I mean, all the rest are like guys, right? So the others, I would speculate, some kind of who knows, I don't know what, some but she, I would assume she was like a sexual assault.
Well, what has been speculated is that the way that the culture is here at Fort Hood is that if you speak up against something that's going on, that's the consequences. There will be consequences for you speaking up. And Vanessa Guillen's sister, I don't know if it was at a press conference or something, but she has said that there's over 200 people that have gone missing from Fort Hood. And so like now they're pushing for a congressional investigation into this, because I think there needs to be some sort of formal investigation needs to be done into what is going on. And hopefully this will just be the first of many investigations that will look into this sort of culture.
Well, I think you're right, Daisy, that it's. I mean, you mentioned military culture, and maybe Fort Hood is worse than the rest of them, but I think it's the military. What is the military? The military is an organization that uses violence or the threat of violence to enact a change or policy, right? That's what they're all about, And like you didn't have, and it's also a very heteronormative organization. I mean, until recently, you didn't have women in combat or whatever. So it was like a very much a male-dominated, weapons-dominated, violence-dominated organization. And not to say there aren't good things about the military, like their training programs are fantastic and everything. But when it comes down to it, when push comes to shove, what the military is about is basically using violence or threatening people with violence, right? I mean, that's what they're all about. They're not about like, let's talk it out, let's work out a solution, right? So, I mean, it's inevitable that this kind of culture in the base, I mean, this is a derivative of the whole organization, of the whole military.
It's about accomplishing the mission by any means necessary. That is the goal of even if you look back at the way that Tulsi used to talk about stuff, she always used to say, it's about the mission. We got to accomplish the mission. Right. It's ingrained in them, indoctrinated in them, that is how you look at things.
Right. So murder is not an impediment. If your mission is trying to cover up something, then that's going to be your little private mission, and you're going to do whatever it takes.
And there's also the psychological effect of being in the military is like the ultimate in peer pressure, right? I mean, in order to be able to, I mean, there's a reason for that. In order to have a cohesive group, in a foreign land fighting, you need to take commands without question, right? So you
Right.
kind of do, right? I believe it's probably true that there is some kind of breaking down of personalities and rebuilding in the image of
That's
the
what boot camp is for,
right.
That's what
right?
boot camp is
Right.
for.
I mean, I do believe that
I
to
mean,
some
isn't West
extent
Point
happens, right?
isn't
Yeah.
West Point like that, where you get I don't know if the term is being shunned or whatever, but it's something like that. That if you
Yeah.
blab on a
Mm.
co you know uh, peer, that you get ostracized.
And
It's
the
pretty
military,
common.
somebody in the military might kind of reasonably say that if you don't behave that way and we're in a combat situation, if you don't unquestionably do what your commander says, that's a risk to everyone. All right.
Right.
And I think that probably gets carried into Fort Hood or military and home bases,
I was just following orders. Yeah,
To what now?
I was
It's what?
just following orders.
Yes. That's right. Oh
Yeah.
man.
So I
Scary
mean,
stuff. That is
here's
scary.
hoping. Here's hoping that something actually comes out of this. Like I said, the fact that it's gotten to Trump's. This could be something that looks really good for him, that helps him out. I hate always looking at things from a presidential campaign standpoint, but unfortunately,
Right.
that is how these things are looked at.
Oh yeah.
It's always a photo op. It's all these people are just surrounded by all these PR consultants, and so for him,
Well,
I'm
hey,
sure that
how many people went and drank the water at Flint, Michigan, and is that crystal clear water now? No, of course not.
Exactly. And think about how like the fact that it cannot Trump's numbers have been hurting according to the polls that are out
Yeah.
there, right? And one of the things that people are not really happy with was his sending the federal troops or the federal agents over to Portland and threatening to do that in other places. People don't like that, and
Right.
that kind of hurts him, especially when you had those veterans that were forming the wall of veterans, and so this can kind of bring him in if he's able to, actually find out what happened over here at Fort Hood and expose somebody. Again, most likely they're just going to use somebody, have them as a patsy, and that's going to be the cover for everything. And again, I'm sorry that I'm such a cynic. It's just what I'm conditioned to, I guess.
I don't think it's going to be enough for him. I mean, it's one thing. I mean, maybe he has some October surprise, but I would think it's got to be more than just solving this case.
No, I'm not saying that this would be the be all end all, but I just feel that any sort of actions that are taken at this point, they're always calculated. They're always trying to see how many points does this help me? And him meeting with the mom and all this kind of stuff, I just don't feel that it was just this genuine urge that
Oh,
he
of course,
had
right.
to,
Right.
to make her feel better about things and to show that he is such a compassionate person. That is not the
Right.
goal, I'm supposing.
Yeah. Well, he is
Right.
in a desperate battle. I mean, basically, I've said this before. If Trump had said that what they should do with the protesters is shoot them in the leg instead of shoot them in the heart, that's a valid approach, like Biden did.
Yes.
You would hear it 10 times a day for the rest of your freaking life. I mean, he's the media situation is just completely unreal. I mean, it's complete fiction that you get from most media these days. Our blessed alternate media on YouTube, etc., is the exception.
Yeah. Except for
Uh,
TYT, right?
there, yeah, right. I don't know if you guys agree with that or not. I've just been seeing they've been just like, I think, fake progressives for, I don't know, when they got the Katzenberg money after 2016 or whatever like that, when they started pushing Hillary, maybe they were doing that for genuine purposes, but at some point they got that inflush of cash from Katzenberg, who's a huge Hillary backer and all that kind of stuff, and they're associated with those talent agencies, CAA and UTA. I just see them as being completely fake progressives at this point.
I hear you.
Yeah, but I'm open to any other opinions on that.
All right, so then I'm gonna go on to
Let's do it.
Okay.
Legislative Week in Review.
Legislative Week in Review.
All right.
Okay. Okie dokes. So for my legislative week in review, what I was looking to see what I can find, right? What interesting stories I could come across. I came across this one, right? I came across this piece of legislation, and it says all information except text for HR 7915 to direct the Secretary of Homeland Security to design and establish a pilot program to facilitate voluntary information sharing between state, local, and regional fusion centers and certain technology companies related to threats of imminent violence and for other purposes. So obviously this piqued my interest, and I love how they always have to add and for other purposes.
I can't hear you, Daisy.
And for other purposes.
Oh, there we go.
That is very nifty for them to be able to have that in there. But yeah, I just thought this was very ominous that, that you want to set up a program to have voluntary information sharing between state, local, and regional fusion centers and certain technology companies.
What is a fusion center?
I don't even know.
I
was just like, what even is this, right?
I know, I'm already like, what, we have fusion centers?
Exactly.
What does that mean, and what are they doing?
And it's they love their Orwellian talk, so it's some sort of backwards thing. Whatever it's meant to, it's not. And so it's been introduced in the House Judiciary and the Homeland Security committees. And again, this is all the information on congress.gov for this, right? Okay. So I thought to myself, all right, so then let's look at who introduced it, right? So Michael T. McCall. I didn't know anything about McCall. Did you guys know anything about McCall?
No.
Never heard of him.
So as you can see, he's a Republican, and he is from Texas. All right. And so when you look at, his webpage, it says, as the chairman of the Homeland Security Committee, it is my duty to oversee Department of Homeland Security and ensure that America's borders are secure. So, all right. So now we know he's in charge of the home. You seem like you want to say.
Well, he's not in charge because the executive is in charge of that. The executive branch. He might oversee it in terms of, but he doesn't run it, right?
Well, oversee would mean almost an auditing.
Yeah, I think it's more like that.
More like verifying that they're doing what their mission is or something, right? And not attacking people up in Portland.
Yeah.
Oops.
Whoopsie. All right. So then I looked at, obviously always on opensecrets.org. I was looking at his finances, and for someone, I guess, of his stature, he's raised a decent amount of money. I mean, I feel like they're such crooks that, all this stuff, it just like makes no difference. It all seems like, duh, of course They're going to have this much money. But anyway, so then I went into what his elections look like, or how much he raised during his elections. So he's run since 2004. And in 2004, he raised almost $3 million. Wow. He ran unopposed.
He's a congressman, not a senator? I mean, he's
a congressman, yeah, 10th district.
Right. That's a lot of money for her.
Yeah. Uh-huh. And if you look at, even in 2018, he raised 1.71 million. So still a lot. And compared specifically to his opponent, who raised 481,000.
Yeah, didn't have a chance.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, essentially, and if you look at here, the numbers of how much they raised, like 2016, the person they raised $6,120. That's essentially running unopposed, or 9,900. Compared to your 1,600,000.
Oh my Lord!
Like, I mean, why even run at that point? Like I said, essentially, he's running unopposed. And then I wanted to look at the industries that he is getting his money from. And as you can see, he gets a good chunk of it from the finance, insurance, and real estate, mostly from individuals, which I guess is good. And then for the PAC money, he gets it from ideological single issue. But I don't know. But as you can see, the majority of his money comes from PACs, right? And so, hold on. I hate how this. All right. So then I wanted to look at who his contributors are. This is for this year for his campaign, and the top 20 contributors are, and we're gonna look at the individuals and the PACs, right? Oh shit! Hold on, sorry, because I changed something.
Is this a setting or something for the?
Yeah. Because I clicked on individuals, so now it's like sorting it that way.
It sorts it. Yeah.
Okay, so obviously don't go off of that because, like I said, I just oh, okay, hold on. There we go. Okay, so we're gonna look at individuals and the money that they get from PACs, right? So we have iHeartMedia, which is mostly from individuals. We have Blackstone Group, of course.
Oh,
can't ever forget about them. And then Raytheon Technologies. And Raytheon Technologies, look, they got $25 from individuals and $11,000 from PAC. Okay. And then we have the Home Depot, $10,000 from the PAC, $525 from individuals. AT&T Incorporated, and most important is to look at these tech companies, these big tech companies that he's getting money from. Dell Technologies, $10,000. Comcast Corporation, $10,000. Then we have Honeywell International, $10,000. Koch Industries, $10,000. Lockheed Martin, we can't forget about Lockheed Martin, $10,000. And Making America Prosperous. You know that just sounds like some sort of evil pack. Like, seriously.
Yeah, very terribly evil pack, I'm sure. Yeah.
Northrop Grumman. So how many defense contractors are we gonna give money to?
They're all there.
Are we gonna take money from?
Yeah.
Samsung Electronics. All right. So obviously he's a man of the people, right? That's who he's getting his funding from.
Which people?
Okay. Exactly. And so then I wanted to look at the bills that he sponsored, right? And this one really stood out to me. So HR 7178, it says to restore American leadership in semiconductor manufacturing by increasing federal incentives in order to enable advanced research and development, secure the supply chain, and ensure long-term national security and economic competitiveness. So the reason why that really stood out to me was because of this. So you see, it has 21 organizations lobbying this one bill, which if you look at his other bills, this one, yes, obviously 380, it's massive. But for the most part, they're all like 1, 2, 3. You know what I'm saying? Like that really 21. 21 is a lot, and especially for the semiconductors.
The description of that just kind of reads like shell out federal money, doesn't it? To enable advanced research and development, secure the supply chain.
Yeah, well,
increasing federal incentives.
This to me sounds like government intervention to make sure that we are the top dog. It says to restore American leadership in semiconductor manufacturing.
But the
and you're
method,
going to see later on that I go into another part of this. But go ahead.
Yeah, well, the method is by increasing federal incentives. What does federal incentives mean? Does it mean, investment dollars?
Yeah, it could mean that, or tax breaks, or
tax breaks. I'm thinking shelling out money in one way or the other.
Yeah. Now I look. He represents Houston, and then over to Austin. So Austin has a tech, area. So maybe it's related to that. I don't know.
Yeah.
Right. But we have a free market. Right?
Yeah,
free market capitalism.
Yeah.
That's what what happened? Oh, wait.
I know, that's exactly what you're talking about. Certain companies, certain blessed companies will get all these tax breaks and all that, and it just increases monopolies by shutting out the little guy.
Exactly. So then I looked at who are the companies that are lobbying, and the first one that comes out is Samsung. And wasn't that one of the companies that gave him $10,000 for his campaign. And then you have like Intel Core, you have Merck, which I don't know if this Merck has anything to do with Merck that does pharmaceuticals. You have IBM Corporation, Texas Instruments, which they make the calculators, because that I know from school.
Yeah.
But yeah, so again, I am not one that believes in coincidences, right? And so then I was thinking, what the hell is a semiconductor, right? Like why is this even a big deal? And so it says semiconductors have had a monumental impact on our society. You find semiconductors at the heart of processor chips as well as transistors. Anything that's computerized or uses radio waves depends on semiconductors. Today, most semiconductor chips and transistors are created with silicon. You may have heard expressions like Silicon Valley and the silicon economy, and that's why, because silicon is at the heart of any electronic device. So obviously this has, and again, this ties in with the whole big tech and how much influence that they have in all these things. It's all just like this, it's like the dragon eating its tail, right? It just goes all in the circle. And so then I was like trying to see, what any information was about this this piece of legislation, and it says the bill would secure $22 billion to promote more U.S. based semiconductor manufacturing. And if you look at here, we are leading in semiconductor sales. Like, we are the world leader already in this.
Right.
So I don't understand why we are having to have legislation to have the government interject, But then as I kept reading on, I see how it says those familiar with semiconductor manufacturing sector likely know that some of the most stalwart producers are based in Taiwan, South Korea, Japan, and China. Again, it comes down to the South China Sea and the trade war, and it all roads lead to China. It feels like at this point, everything, and especially because I think it was in this, because I think they're talking about the chips in here, where they were talking about who it is that introduced the bill, and Marco Rubio was part of it, and that anytime that Marco Rubio is a part of something, he is like the warmonger, imperialist, regime change, all those activity sounds, whatever you want to call them, he's all for that. So I knew that when he was in that, and he was the one who was pushing for the Hong Kong Autonomy Act, and I don't know, I just think that all of this, again, it ties into like domestic policy, because right now you have all these China hawks, right? All these people who are just pushing and saying that China is the biggest enemy in the world right now, and that we can only survive if we put down China, or if it's the end of China. That's the only way.
We have always been at war with East Asia.
Sorry?
We have always been at war with East Asia.
Right, but as long as we continue to point the finger at someone else, it's that otherism, right? As long as we point the finger at someone else, then our elected officials, they never have to look at why it is that we have the amount of poverty that we have in this country, the amount of like unemployment, and like all these different issues that we're going through. As long as it's over there, the problem's over there. It's a China virus, right? Like that's
right. It's that, plus we always have to have somebody has to be the boogeyman so that we can sell arms and all that kind of stuff too, right?
Right.
I mean, it's it serves both purposes. Distracting from our own problems.
I mean, good luck with that, because if you go to any grad department and tech departments, or basically STEM departments and grad schools around the U.S., I mean, it's all foreign students, right? Because our school system does not support that level of preparation for these for these advanced technology for studying the advanced technology. So like you go to any, I mean, I know it's obviously it's been affected by COVID, but if you go to MIT or you go to any of these places, I mean, all the grad students are all from, China and different places, right? So
Yeah,
But
I mean,
soon enough, that might change because
right,
ICE threatened to, supposedly if all the classes are going to be online at these universities, then there is no justification for them being here. So they would end up having to take their classes online, but in their own country. So who knows how that's, really going to work out.
wow.
right. But I mean, we're in a global economy, so it's like it just seems like it's kind of the trend is going in a certain direction, and China is ascendant. And I don't think this legislation is really going to change. I mean, it may protect their friends in Austin or whatever, but it's not in terms of like changing the trend. I don't think it's going to be able to do that. That's just my feeling.
Yeah, and I think a lot of it is what you did point out in some cases, Daisy, where the same people getting the money, the people that gave him money. I think there's just
Tit for tat.
I think there's just a handshake thing going on there as well too. But I think it all factors in. The reason he can justify it and get people like Marco Rubio to go along with it is because it serves the purposes you're indicating.
Right, right. And even
Good
when
one.
they end up leaving, their positions, like for them, it's not even scary of, oh, I would lose my seat or whatever, because they end up either becoming a lobbyist or they end up working for these industries that they ended up helping out. So
Exactly.
we have the proof in the pudding with pretty much everyone on Trump's cabinet,
Oh
is
yeah.
some person from their industry that they are meant
Yes.
to somehow regulate the industry that they either came from or that they're going to end up going to afterwards.
That's right. Absolutely. That's still a horrific problem, the lobbyist industry, where how else can it make sense for somebody to be a senator and try and maintain a second home in Washington D.C. on a whatever it is, 150,000 salary or whatever like that, right?
174,000.
Oh yeah, it just doesn't make any
Right.
sense.
Right, right.
Oh,
But
very good.
trading, stuff like that doesn't happen. No.
Oh yeah.
Excellent. All right. Was there more legislation? Or are we good?
Nope.
Okay.
All right, guys.
All right.
Another amazing week. Maybe we'll be talking VP pick next week. Maybe not if they're still struggling through it.
Yeah, unless Joe Biden drops out or whatever. You never know.
I'm still saying code holder for Hillary, though I think that's more difficult with Bill being exposed in the Maxwell stuff. But we'll just see what shakes out. Who knows?
We live in interesting times.
Yes.
All right. Take care,
All right,
everybody.
folks. Another nice discussion. Thank you.
Peace out. Talk to you later.